Hi everybody. So in this video I just want to do a quick recording lecture video for those of you in section 408. So I just want to talk a little bit about your writing assignment 1 and some of the feedback that I've handed back, and highlight a couple of problems that I've been seeing in students' writing and how to fix that in future assignments. We'll talk a little bit today about Carrie Cracknell's short film Nora, and I just want to sort of wrap up our discussion of A Doll's House by looking at a kind of modern short film that takes some of the themes of Ibsen's play and sort of translates them into a modern version or modern context. And then I'll introduce to our short fiction reading, The Yellow Wallpaper, which we will talk more about on Thursday's class. So that's kind of what I want to cover for today's video lecture. Okay, so these are a couple of problems that I've noted in people's writing from writing assignment number 1. Dropped quotations and formatting of quotations. So those are two things that I've been noting that are frequently mistaken in students' writing. There's too many drop quotations, so you need to be integrating them into a sentence, and then for long quotes you need to know how to format that as well in APA style. Comma splices or run-on sentences and sentence fragments. Those are also like the two major errors that I've been seeing in students' writing. So it's just about being able to sort of identify those when you are doing them and then correcting the problem. And then the final remark is just to add more transitions. This is applying to everybody. You could always add more transition words and phrases into your writing, and it's going to really bring everything together more smoothly and coherently into a solid essay that has an argument that flows throughout it. So adding transitions is going to be like the next step to elevate your writing. But let's take a look at dropped quotations. So this is an example. I apologize to the student whose paper I took this from, but again, it's an example that I saw in many students' papers. So don't feel like you're being targeted or anything like that, or isolated. This is a common problem that I've seen in multiple papers. So this one, the student, it was a period here, so this is their original version. So Augie had to stay in the infirmary for a whole month, period. And then they have their quotation. So I know why I was not taken to the hospital. They were afraid I might talk too much and maybe expose the person who harmed me. And then they have the citation, Morasti and Carpenter, year, page number, period, and then their next sentence. So everything about this is good except for this problem of the quote, which is dropped, or sometimes we call this floating or dumped. But it's floating or disconnected from the sentence above it and the sentence below it. So it's kind of just on its own in the paragraph. So we call that a dumped quote. So it's not connected, it's not integrated properly, and it's just sort of there without any introduction or context for it. But if you notice, this sentence does provide context. It's kind of describing what the quote is going to elaborate on. So it says Augie had to stay in the infirmary for a whole month, and then it gives us the information about that moment in the book. So it makes sense to me to add a colon here. So a colon would help fix this problem. I mean, it would fix the problem of a drop quote. So by using a colon instead of a period, you're connecting the quote to the sentence that comes before it. So in this case, the quote becomes the example that you're talking about here. So it's useful to sort of set up the quote as the quote kind of elaborates or provides the evidence that you're going to use to support your argument. And so you could definitely use a colon. That would be correct. There are other ways to fix this problem. So you could have a little bit of a short phrase introductory phrase to open the sentence. And it's a signal phrase if it's incorporating the author or the speaker's name. So you could say Morasti discusses or discussed, and then have the quote. So Morasti discussed, I know why I was not taken to the hospital, blah, 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 blah. So again, you're using the speaker's name and a verb in that case before the quote. Oopsie. So now your quotation is part of this sentence and it flows smoothly. The thing to figure out about this is you do need a main clause. So you need a subject, in this case Morasti, and you need a verb, discussed, and then you can have the quote. But you can't really have just Morasti and then a colon or something like that. Like you can't just do that. That would still be a dropped quote. So you need to kind of integrate the quote properly, grammatically, into a sentence. You could have writes or something like that. Just his name plus a verb, and that would be enough to create a little introductory phrase for this quote to be part of a sentence. So yeah, just the other way was just a colon. So that one I think is easy if you know how to use a colon properly. It's very easy to sort of attach a quote to a sentence, but then the other way would be just to add that little introductory phrase. Either way would be fine. If you wanted to incorporate the info of the authors in a signal phrase, then you could also do that. So you would need to, in that case, include both authors' names. A lot of students just put one author's name, and that's incorrect just because you have both authors cited in your reference. So your signal phrases need to correspond with that. So you could say Morasti and Carpenter, again, the signal phrases are a little awkward with this one just because there's two authors, but Morasti and Carpenter included the following or something like that. I'd have to figure, you could work around what you want that first part to be. But in that case, you would take out this info in your end citation. So also make sure if the names of the authors are read out loud, like in your sentence, you're using AND because it's part of the sentence now. You're not using the little and symbol anymore. That's only included in brackets. So this one, Augie had to stay in the infirmary for the whole month. Morasti and Carpenter described this. I know why I was not taken to the hospital. They were afraid, blah, 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 blah. So again, you can play around with the phrasing of it. You could also just say, according to Morasti and Carpenter, that would also be fine. And then have that information like so. So there's a couple different ways to fix the problem, but it's important to know that you can't just have a quotation on its own floating in the middle of your paragraph. You need to do something else to integrate it into a sentence and connect it grammatically with the rest of your writing. Okay, so the other issue with quotations is when to format them as a block quotation. So APA rules are if a quotation is longer than 40 words, so you could highlight, what this chunk of text is, and then if you were in a Word document, it would tell you how much words you're in or how many words you have. I'm not sure if I can do that in PowerPoint, but yeah, I don't think I can. But anyway, it's over 40 words for this quote. I know it because I took it from another student's paper. So you need to format a long quotation in a specific way in APA style. So you need to indent it, and it has to be, again, it might not work in this context with this PowerPoint, but it'll be indented as a passage, and then your paragraph will just continue as follows after it. So you would have this sentence at the same margin as your first sentence here, and only this part would be indented. And then once you indent the passage, the quotation marks get removed. You add your period back there, and you take this period away. But you should have a full indent for this whole passage that is a quote, and it should be, offset from your margin. So that's basically it. So it's just a matter of recognizing that the quotation is a long one, and making sure it's formatted properly then with the indent. Take out the quote marks, add the period in the right place, and then make sure you continue your paragraph as originally. The paragraph keeps going after the quote. So you don't start a new paragraph right after this one. You need to spend a little bit of time talking about the quote, explaining it in your own words, and elaborating on why it fits into your essay. So you need a little bit of, like, at least one sentence after the quote that kind of does a little bit of commentary. And that should all go in the same paragraph. So the quote and the commentary go in the same paragraph. Again, for this one, I've just used the signal phrase Morasti states, but I've had the full citation down here. So if Morasti, because we're dealing with two authors and it's kind of a unique book that way, where Morasti's kind of remembering his personal stories, it does make sense to sometimes isolate him as just one person speaking. So in that case, you would still need to cite both authors in your citations. But you could just locate Morasti on his own in your signal phrase. And I wouldn't separately put the year up here just because that he's not listed separately in your reference page. So it does get a little bit confusing. So some people got, there's a lot of little errors like that, but it wasn't too big of a deal for this time around. Okay, and then the next problem that we see a lot in students writing is comma splices and run-ons. So this is when you have one main clause, and then you have a comma, and then you have another main clause. So you have two sentences that are incorrectly joined together with a comma. And you'll remember we did talk about this, that you can use a semicolon, you can add a conjunction, one of those fanboys that we talked about, for, and, nor, or, yet, but, so. So those words can go in there. You could add or subordinate 1/2 of the sentence as well. So again, you have options to fix the problem, but it's important to recognize that they were also disciplined. That's a sentence. And then these children were abused is also a sentence. So you have two main clauses or two sentences incorrectly joined right here. With a comma. So you need to fix that problem. You could easily put in a semicolon and that would fix it. You could put a period, or you could add some other as well, or something like that. Something to connect the sentences that fixes that run-on. For this one, talking in Cree was a forbidden act in the schools, even knowing this, sorry, I might have copied this down wrong. Even knowing this, Augie still spoke Cree. So again, you have a comma splice because these are two main clauses that are incorrectly joined with a comma. So again, you could put a period And this one, this is the main clause, and then this one, this was the main clause. So you kind of do need to recognize, where your main clauses or sentences end, or where they should end, and also be able to recognize when there is a main clause in the sentence. And then this one as well, he describes enrolling before the usual age of 6. He was often treated kindly at the start and less targeted than the older boys. So again, you have a comma incorrectly joining two sentences together. That's what a comma splice is. Sometimes you can have a run-on, which has no punctuation at all. So this would be a run-on, but just a comma is usually used. And students tend to overuse commas in general. So be more intentional or deliberate with comma usage. Make sure it's placed there for a reason and it's the right punctuation to use. So just be a little bit like mindful that, hey, I'm not using a comma in place of a period for this sentence. So here you could put a period or a semicolon and fix that problem. Okay, and then another error was sentence fragments. So this is the case where you have a sentence and it's missing some information, so it doesn't quite create a main clause. So it's either missing a subject, the one doing the action is missing, or something is wrong with the verb and it's not creating a main clause. So this student had the malnourishment and hunger these children endured had lasting effects, and then resulting in stunted growth and lower insulin levels as mentioned in Mosby and Galloway. So in some cases it's just a matter of, hey, this should be a comma, not a period, right? So they've actually, put a period where a comma should be, and that would have fixed the problem. So the malnourishment and hunger these children endured had lasting effects. That's a good sentence. But then this one, resulting in stunted growth and lower insulin levels, as mentioned in Mosby and Galloway, is not a complete sentence. There's no main clause in there. So you could just fix that by adding this as a comma, and then that's a better sentence, or that's at least fixing the problem. But right now you have a fragment, so this part is the fragment. So I would need to have, Mosby and Galloway mentioned that malnourishment results in stunted growth and lower insulin levels. You could rearrange the sentence to create a main clause, but you do need a subject and a verb and then the information to complete the sentence. This one is more so just a semicolon problem. You'll remember a semicolon needs to be between two sentences. It can't connect a sentence and a fragment. That's not the proper use of a semicolon. So this one, Canada is a country that was colonized by Europeans during the 16th century. And then this half of the sentence is a fragment. So taking the land from its original inhabitants, the indigenous peoples. So again, here you are just needing a comma, not a semicolon. So sometimes it's, you need to use the punctuation that's what it's known for or what it's meant for. So you might want to review what is the difference between a colon, a comma, and a semicolon, and figure out if you're using those 3 punctuation points correctly. Okay, and then my last words of advice for essay writing is just to add more transition words. Add them at the start of each body paragraph. Add them when you start your conclusion. Add them whenever you're adding an example. Just use them throughout the paragraph, and it will make your writing sound a lot more professional, and it'll flow much more smoothly. It'll be less choppy, and you'll see there's going to be more unity as a whole across your paper. So whenever you need to summarize something, like maybe in your conclusion, you might use one of these phrases transition phrases. So you might say something like all in all together, in conclusion, in summary, therefore, etc., etc. So you have a lot of options to choose from, but these would be useful to say in front of your summary statement. You might also add a transition word whenever you're going to give an example from the book or from a text, or just from your own mind if you were bringing up your own example. So you could say, you know, for instance, for example, in other words, to illustrate. So there's lots of different ones. So specifically, you can use transitions anytime you want to add evidence, add an example, or any illustration that you want to make in the text. Some other ones, so you might also use transitions for sequence. So if your argument kind of is following a pattern, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4 points, you might also use these at the start of a paragraph, or you might show how one paragraph is connected to the last paragraph, or if you're just adding another example again, you might say furthermore, in addition. You might use in the first place, in the last place, or lastly. So you might talk about sequence, right? So first, second, third, or first and last, or first and next, and then. So all of those kind of words help us build off of each other. And then again, for adding information, you might have in addition to, or again, first, last, next, second, all of those points could also be added. First, second, and you're sort of numbering your points throughout the paragraph or throughout the essay. So yeah, just a note, just try to add more transitions into your writing. It's going to elevate the quality of your writing, and it'll help build on organization as well. So the more transitions you add, the stronger it looks like you're in control of your argument and you're presenting things in a really sort of strategic, methodical way when you're writing.